Now, an ex-royal staff member has opened up about his time working at Buckingham Palace. Dan Ottaway, who served as a chef, claims that out of all of the royals that he catered for, Prince Andrew was difficult and more demanding than others.
Behind the pleasant balcony waves and neatly arranged public photos, another version has always lived quietly in the background. One softly mentioned by the workers who stayed closest to the royals, the ones who handled the uniforms, looked after the estate, and witnessed conduct no press team could ever hide. Today, we revisit some of the most memorable stories shared by ex-palace employees who served around the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Their memories paint a very different portrait from the smiling royal the public once applauded.
But Prince Andrew was quite difficult, and he was much more demanding in the words that he used than his relatives. But he had a lot of praise for Princess Kate. She used to bring the children in after a meal to meet all the staff and be very, very grateful.
And as Andrew continues to reject every claim made against him, including the long-standing accusations raised by Virginia Giuffre, which ended in a civil agreement in 2022, former staff members maintain that the actions they witnessed behind closed doors were a warning long before the world understood something was off. So let's return to the start. What did the servants notice? How did the household react? And why are so many now asking whether the signals were always visible? Let's begin with the account that first loosened the palace mask. Inside Buckingham Palace, a young valet named Paul once stayed in a small flat directly linked to Andrew's private rooms. To others, it seemed like a position of closeness and trust, but people who knew him said he carried the weight of that job. Co-workers recalled how he feared the sound of Andrew's buzzer, which could echo at any moment, not for danger, not for royal duties, but for minor tasks. One story shared in later interviews came from the late 1990s. Andrew owned a Jack Russell Terrier, and those who served him said, if the dog stirred in the middle of the night, the duty fell to the valet, not the prince. Even at 2 or 3 in the morning, the buzzer would ring and Paul would be ordered to take the dog outside while Andrew stayed comfortable in bed.
My dealings with Andrew were very minor and very few, but the odd occasion that I did have dealings with him, he was arrogant, he was rude, he was bumptious, and I don't take that from anybody, and I gave him as good as he tried to give me. I was once told by a colleague, well, speaking to him like that, you'll get fired. I said, no, he won't tell anybody, and bullies don't tell anybody.
Former security members who worked the night shift have said they sometimes found the worn-out valet in the garden smoking or whispering frustrations, just trying to stay awake. These tensions built slowly over years. One guard recalled the valet once admitting he couldn't bear the man. Another remembered a grim joke about hoping Andrew's upcoming ski trip might offer a permanent way out. It was gallows-style humor, but it showed the bitterness that quietly grew through his staff. Their complaints weren't rare. Many claimed that Andrew was granted far more leniency than his siblings, protected by his position, his place in the family, and a long-told reputation as the Queen's favorite child. Rules were rarely applied, and poor conduct often brushed aside as immaturity. Former palace employees have described a workplace where loyalty wasn't only expected, it was demanded. In that environment, questioning a prince's orders was never an option. This ranking system shaped every part of daily life. Workers ate in separate dining rooms based on their level. Junior staff used microwaves and kettles, while higher officials received full meals from white-gloved footmen. Even in the service stairways, people moved with an unspoken awareness of status. Most who joined the household stayed for years, tied to the institution through housing, pensions, and identity. It kept everything operating smoothly, but built a culture where speaking up felt impossible.
Unfortunately, Prince Andrew was totally different. He could fly off the handle at the smallest thing. He would be abusive. He would shout, he would swear. So we had a particular issue with Prince Andrew.
So this leads to the question, if this was how Andrew acted inside the palace, surrounded by workers trained to enforce routine and structure, what happened when he stepped outside that controlled world? This takes us to the long silence that protected him for so many years. Security officers were always close by, but their duties were tightly limited. They were assigned to keep him physically safe, not to interfere with his personal behavior. Officers who later spoke anonymously to British papers said they did not follow him into private rooms, did not attend every meeting, and did not judge the people he met. They were employees, not companions. They stood beside him, not above him. Looking back, some admit they noticed things that felt unusual at the time. Sudden trips, strange schedules, visitors arriving and leaving quickly. Nothing solid, nothing provable, but enough to make some uneasy once later scandals became public. The palace structure maintained the silence. Loyalty moved upward. accountability rarely moved downward. In such a hierarchy, even worrying behavior could continue quietly, because confronting someone born into privilege felt nearly impossible. Into this setting came a young housemaid named Charlotte, who would later become one of the most vocal former staff members about her time working near Andrew. Her interviews, printed in British outlets like The Sun and the Daily Mail, describe a man she viewed as rude, moody, and impossible to satisfy. Her comments offered a sharp picture. She described him shouting about a tiny space left in the bedroom curtains, a gap so small she said she struggled to see it. She remembered him marching down the hall, voice raised, leaving her upset. Those who worked with her said this was not unusual. His temper, they claimed, shifted without warning. One detail that captured public attention involved his well-known collection of stuffed animals. Former security officer Paul Page testified in court that Andrew had specific rules for how the soft toy should be placed on the bed. A laminated chart reportedly showed each toy's position. If the setup wasn't exact, he could grow irritated.
And the staff are there to look after him. The maids and the servants are there to look after him. And there's no reason whatsoever why a person with a royal title should be verbally abusive to his staff. But unfortunately, not many people understand the hierarchy within the palace. It's an archaic system. So it's a very, very old system. It's not like if you worked in an office and you swore at someone, it'd be dealt with. In the palace, it's totally different. People are too frightened to take the complaints higher up the chain. Bearing in mind Prince Andrew was the Queen's favourite.
These stories sounded almost silly at first, but staff said there was nothing funny about them. The pressure to meet unrealistic standards turned every task into an emotional trap. And when Charlotte said she left the palace with her confidence shaken, many ex-workers publicly agreed. But this wasn't the start of Andrew's entitlement. It was the continuation of patterns seen long before he became an adult. Accounts from former staff, childhood contacts, and early biographers described a boy who pushed limits from a young age. Several documentaries quoted former grooms and royal workers, saying Andrew showed signs of cruelty and arrogance even as a child. Some stories became almost legend, like the claim that stable hands once punished him for hitting a horse by placing him head first into a manure pile. While this tale remains unconfirmed, its survival says something about Andrew's reputation among those closest to the family. His treatment of his younger brother Edward was described by early biographers as controlling. At Gordonstown, the tough Scottish school attended by several royals, Andrew's behavior reportedly earned him unflattering nicknames. Teachers said he could be charming when he wanted, but he was also known for teasing and outbursts. As the years went on, the sense that he played by different rules only intensified. While Charles became known for kindness towards staff, and Princess Anne for her discipline and firm but fair manner, Andrew's household stayed the one most staff hoped to avoid. Former workers spoke warmly of Charles learning their names, Edward treating them politely, and Anne showing respect and professionalism. Andrew, by contrast, was seen as the hardest of the Queen's children. A longtime royal employee once told a reporter that working with him felt like tiptoeing on eggshells daily. When you place these private accounts beside the later allegations that surfaced in the 2010s, a pattern becomes harder to dismiss. The most serious claims involved his ties to Jeffrey Epstein and the accusations made by Virginia Giuffre. Andrew has always denied wrongdoing. In 2019, he gave his well-known BBC Newsnight interview where he argued her story was untrue, but in 2022 he agreed to settle the civil case brought by Giuffre with no admission of guilt, a move widely interpreted as an effort to avoid a public court battle. At the time, sources said the Queen helped contribute to the payment. Though exact figures were never confirmed, British media often reported estimates up to £12 million. It was a turning point that reshaped Andrew's public reputation. When you combine these later events with the recollections of his staff, a picture forms of a man who lived largely shielded from consequences. While many royals balanced privilege with responsibility, Andrew reportedly leaned on his status. Where others earned loyalty, Andrew expected obedience. And where others learned empathy, his critics say he developed entitlement. So how did this dynamic take hold? Former staff said the palace structure itself played a central role. The strict hierarchy, the reliance on royal approval, and the financial ties between staff and the institution created a space where speaking up felt dangerous, and challenging a prince felt unthinkable. Loyalty was rewarded, silence was encouraged. This allowed troubling behavior to continue because the system was never designed to confront it. It was built to protect the monarchy's image. And now, with Andrew removed from military roles, royal patronages, and the right to use his royal highness in an official manner, many people ask whether more truths remain hidden behind palace walls. Staff loyalty kept countless stories unspoken for years. As more former workers share experiences late in life, free from fear of losing their jobs, we are hearing the kinds of accounts that once stayed sealed inside. Which brings one final question as we end. If this is what staff are willing to reveal publicly, how much more remains unsaid? Tell me in the comments whether you think the public has heard everything, or if more chapters remain hidden behind those gates. And if you enjoy deep dives into royal history, scandals, and the stories the palace wishes we'd forget, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update.